Welcome back to this channel where we provide premium legal content. Today in this video, we'll be looking at the history of the imposition of state of emergency in some certain states in Nigeria. We will look at the precedents as well as the dates under which the states of emergency were imposed, as well as the provision of our laws that backed up the imposition of state of emergency under this president in Nigeria. The history of the declaration of state of emergency in Nigeria dates back to the 29th day of May 1962, when Sir Tafawa Balewa, the then Prime Minister, convened an emergency session of the Federal Parliament to impose a state of emergency in Western Region Nigeria. What was the reason? Well, some reasons have been attributed. Primarily, the Action Group crisis of 1962, that political crisis that almost engulfed Western Nigeria, was a major reason. And to quell that crisis, Sir Tafawa Balewa, who was the Prime Minister, imposed a state of emergency in Western Nigeria. And in place of the democratically elected Premier of the Western region, Sir Akintola, he appointed Dr. Majekodunmi as the sole administrator of the western part of Nigeria, charging the sole administrator to ensure that peace and tranquility returns to Western region Nigeria. The legal provision under which Sir Tafawa Balewa imposed a state of emergency in Nigeria was hinged on Section 65 of the 1960 Independence Constitution. Whether or not peace returned after the imposition is also a story for another day. The second time a state of emergency will be imposed in Nigeria would be precisely some 42 years later, during the tenure of President Olusegun Obasanjo. Precisely on the 18th day of May 2003, President Olusegun Obasanjo imposed a state of emergency in Plateau State, suspended the democratically elected governor Joshua Dariye, and in place of that governor, appointed a sole administrator in person of Chris Ali, a retired general in the Nigerian army, charging the retired general to ensure that peace and tranquility returns to that region. But what made or led President Olusegun Obasanjo to impose that state of emergency? Major reason: religious crisis in Plateau State, where close to about 2,000 people had died due to religious crisis in Plateau State. Whether or not peace returned after the imposition of the state of emergency is also a story for another day. The third time a state of emergency will be imposed in Nigeria will be under the presidency of President Goodluck Ebele Jonathan. Precisely on the 31st day of December 2011, President Goodluck Ebele Jonathan imposed state of emergency in some 4 states of Nigeria. The states are Niger State, Adamawa State, as well as Plateau State, and one other state. President Goodluck Ebele Jonathan imposed a state of emergency in these certain local governments within those states. And then the second time under President Goodluck Jonathan's administration would experience the imposition of a state of emergency would be in 2013, when President Goodluck Jonathan imposed state of emergency in 3 northern states, and that was states of Borno State, Adamawa, as well as Yobe State. And President Goodluck Jonathan mobilized the security forces into these parts of the country, charging them to ensure that peace and tranquility, is returned to these places. Strikingly, President Goodluck Jonathan did not remove the democratically elected governors or the House of Assembly of those states. President Goodluck Jonathan based his decision to impose a state of emergency on Section 305 of the 1999 Constitution, just like President Olusegun Obasanjo had done. The 5th time we would experience a state of emergency in Nigeria would be precisely on the 18th day of March 2025, when President Bola Ahmed Tinubu imposed a state of emergency in Rivers State, suspended the democratically elected governor, Sir Siminalayi Fubara, as well as the deputy governor, Joyce Odu, as well as the democratically elected House of Assembly. And then, in place of these people, appointed a Vice Admiral, retired Vice Admiral Ibok Ete Ibas, to administer the state and charged the Vice Admiral to ensure that peace and tranquility also returns to these places. But let's look at the reason for the imposition of state of emergency during President Goodluck Ebele Jonathan's administration, as well as President Bola Ahmed Tinubu. During President Goodluck Ebele Jonathan's administration, there were a series of bombings, a series of insurgency, banditry attack, as well as Boko Haram terrorism ravaging, this part of the nation. And that was a major reason for the imposition of the state of emergency on the basis of Section 305 of the 1999 Constitution. Similarly, President Bola Ahmed Tinubu based his decision to impose the state of emergency in Rivers State on Section 305 of the 1999 Constitution due to the political and economic crisis in Rivers State. If you watch this video up to this point, you will discover that we have not looked at the rightness or wrongness of the decision of these presidents. Whether or not they were right would be looked at in the next video. You might want to stick around for the next video so that you can continue to understand the rightness or wrongness of that decision. It's also important that we remind you that this channel requires your support to grow. You can support the growth of this channel by subscribing to this channel and clicking on the notification button so that you can be the first that will receive premium legal content that drops on this channel. See you on the next video.